Hello. Second investigation. Well, part 2 of 4. I never know which way around to say all these. By the way, investigating time. Still can't quite believe what just happened.
I know. I inquired with the bailiff after the court session was adjourned, and it seems Mr. Vigil was taken to hospital to recover.
Right. 10 years ago now, Mr. Vigil attempted to commit suicide by jumping out of the window of the prison governor's office. But ever since then, he's completely blocked the memory of those events from his mind. Nobody knew his secret. Not his family, not even the man himself. I forced it out into the open. Is it wrong of me to do that? Did I overstep the mark, I wonder?
Bruno!
Oh, Iris.
You were miles away. Anyway, I brewed a fresh pot of soothing tea for you.
Oh, thank you.
You and Susie have had an exhausting day so far, haven't you? Oh. Thank you, Iris. How thoughtful of you.
Do you happen to know where Mr. Sholmes is? When we came out of the courtroom back into the defendant's antechamber, he disappeared.
Oh, no, I don't know. He just suddenly sprang to his feet and left. All he said was, "I must leave." I wonder if he's pursuing the mystery of Inspector Gregson's death. Well, you know what Hurley's always saying, don't you? There are mysteries in this world that should perhaps never be solved. But the construction of a solution comes only at the expense of the destruction of something else.
What does that mean?
He knows very well that when you open someone else's old wounds, you often open your own too. But he just can't take his own advice and leave well alone. Solving mysteries is too important to him.
That's so true.
But that's what I like about Hurley after all.
I suppose that's the heart of a great detective in some ways.
So then, let's have tea, and then I'll give you a hand.
Oh, do you have time, Iris?
Yes, I've finished this month's manuscript at last, with barely a day to spare before the deadline. Oh, I'm so looking forward to it. A brand new story to read in the adventures of Sherlock Holmes. You know, I always hide Hurley's violin in the days before I have a deadline.
You do? Oh, Mr. Sholmes.
I'm sure that's very wise, Iris. How sensible of you. Now then, my dear fellows, let's make a plan of action before we continue our investigation. So, how did it go in court this morning?
No, we still don't know the truth about what really happened, but one thing's increasingly clear. Lord Van Zeeks definitely didn't do it.
Oh, goody. Yes, that's right. We managed to uncover several new facts as well. Oh, really?
And there was another development too, wasn't there?
Yes, it's quite clear now that Kazuma Summer's not himself. The way he's acting, it's almost as if he's possessed.
I know, I mean, at the end of the proceedings earlier, it was like a bloodhound the way he was chasing down Mr. Vigil's forgotten past. He's not normally so mercilessly persistent. What's going on in his head, I wonder? I really need to sit down with Kazuma and try to understand what he's going through. Gregson was really murdered the day before his body was discovered. And Lord Van Zix has to be innocent, you see.
What? The day before? Well, that should be easy enough to work out just by examining the corpse, surely. Yes, you would expect so, but curiously, no time of death was included in the autopsy report. That is curious.
There's still unanswered questions about Lord Van Zix, though, aren't there?
Do you mean?
I mean, what was he doing now on Fresno Street that day in the first place?
Well, according to the man's testimony, he said he was investigating Inspector Gregson, didn't he?
It turns out that little room was actually the inspector's secret office.
Oh, that sounds like it has all the markings of a wonderfully devilish plot.
And why was that notice board in there covered in all those particular papers? Papers about cases with a link to the Reaper. I'm starting to get a bad feeling about all this.
Oh dear, that sounds more like something horribly devilish. We must start by looking into Inspector Gregson's movements of late.
I never imagined I might have to be investigating an inspector's movements.
Well, according to the entry in his diary, he was carrying out an incognito investigation of the Red-Headed League the day before his death. Oh, you mean he was doing the same as Hurley?
Well, Mr. Sholmes was trying to apply, whereas the inspector was supposed to be investigating.
I do wish it had been the other way around.
Anyway, as it turns out, the inspector who went to investigate the Red-Headed League that day wasn't actually Gregson at all. It was Mr. Vigil in possession of Gregson's identification.
You know what that sounds like to me? Establishing an alibi. Oh my. Yes, you're absolutely right, Iris.
But why would Gregson need an alibi?
It would appear that the inspector had something to do that he wished to keep secret. I don't believe it. I always thought he was just a harmless lover of fish and chips.
Perhaps they were seasoned with something a little more potent than salt and vinegar.
I think perhaps we should try to move away from food analogies.
Well, anyway, Lord Van Zix felt the need to investigate Gregson.
Yes, I agree. We must try to find out what he knows. Vigil, you say? Isn't that the name of the lady who came to visit Hurley yesterday? That's right. To ask Mr. Sholmes if he would help her to find her missing husband.
Only Mr. Sholmes completely passed the buck to us. Actually, didn't you say that Mr. Vigil had been taken to hospital? Do you know which one?
It's St. Sinners.
I'm starting to wonder if all the other hospitals in London have closed down.
That's amazing, Reno. You found the lady's husband already.
Well, I suppose I have. By accident.
And 10 years ago, while Mr. Vigil was the chief warder at the prison, he was responsible for overseeing the professor's incarceration. No.
So when the convict escaped, he was held responsible and immediately dismissed.
Sometimes I really don't want to grow up.
There's more. For 10 years after that, while he was ostentatiously working as a peddler, he also had another secret job. He was paid by Gregson to be his stand-in, to impersonate the inspector.
To impersonate Gregsy? But why?
I have absolutely no idea.
Ginny was right. I'm starting to think all adults are up to no good now. Including you, Bruno.
I haven't paid anyone to impersonate me.
That means he has ties to the Professor and to Inspector Gregson, though. So I do think we ought to pay a visit to Mr. Vigil, don't you?
Back to St. Sinners, then.
Well, I think it's clear what we need to do, isn't it? Let us investigate, my dear fellows. Oh, Iris, you're even more enthusiastic than usual today. If anyone has anything to hide, my special Wilson shooting iron will soon set them straight.
That water pistol?
It's stuffed full of piping hot extras. It's stuffed full of a piping hot extra special blend of mine. And I'm quite sure it'll be very effective.
I'd better be careful not to hide anything. Well, it feels a little strange that Mr. Sholmes is nowhere to be seen, but still. Let's go and see what we can find out.
Yes.
Just do them in order.
Lord Van Zeeks is reading. Look. He doesn't seem like he wants visitors, does he?
But he must have noticed that we're here, surely. What do you Nipponese want? It's no way to greet the lawyer who's trying his hardest to prove your innocence, is it? Perhaps not. I apologize. So, what can I do for you, Mr. Naruhodo?
Lord Van Zeeks, speaking earnestly. Oh, the fog will lift over London for the first time in months tomorrow.
This does feel very, very strange. I must say I was impressed. Oh, well, thank you. Not by you, by your fellow Nipponese, your prosecutor friend. Oh, I see, yes. It's sardonic, don't you think? For a man such as me, so loathing of Nipponese, to be entirely at the mercy of the two of you. I suppose it's retribution for having played the part of the Reaper all these years. Played the part. You once told me that you'd gladly allow people to believe you were the Reaper, because it helped reduce the amount of serious crime that took place in London. If keeping quiet and playing the part benefits the cause, a cause I myself am committed to pursuing, then why would I choose to say anything? But the henchman of a criminal killed by the Reaper attacked you only the other day. That was just the most recent of many attempts on your life, wasn't it? Someone is clearly profiting from your silence about all this. Someone is using you. Believe me, ever since the Reaper first appeared, I've been doing my utmost to expose him, or rather, expose the organization.
It's a whole organization?
It's inconceivable that all those accidents were orchestrated by one man. No, the Reaper always appears to have very accurate information about the accused in each case, which can only mean that somebody at Scotland Yard is involved.
Someone at... You can't mean...
It's taken me many years, but I finally identified the central figure in the Reaper organization. Tobias Gregson.
No. No!
Gregson? The Reaper? So, the reason you were investigating Inspector Gregson is because you intended to expose him as the Reaper? As I said, the Reaper of the Bailey is no single person. It's a highly secret organization with close ties to Scotland Yard. But there's no doubt that Gregson was a key member of that organization.
I don't believe it. Are you saying that Gregsy, that he was behind all those awful criminals meeting there?
Gregson didn't do the dirty work himself.
Oh,
He was the tactician. His job was to covertly investigate the markings and plot their assassination. The marks and plot their assassinations. Blech. In order to do that without arousing suspicion, he regularly needed a firm alibi. Which is where Mr. Vigil came in, posing as the inspector. Vigil knows nothing of the Reaper. But the room he rents on Fresno Street was almost certainly the headquarters of the operation. Gregson would have met the assassin there for briefings. So you don't actually know who carried out the killings then? Actually, I do have a name. What?
well, if you can name the man, you have the true identity of the Reaper already then.
Or if I can name the woman.
Oh,
She's a young woman by the name of Asa Shin. Wait, what? Shin? Yes, Asa Shin. The true name of a terrifying killer I know only too well. She came to Japan posing as a visiting student and murdered Dr. John H. Wilson. And just when it seemed that diplomatic protection would help her escape Japan and conviction, the mysterious woman was herself murdered in a small summer beach hut. And that woman was actually the Reaper at the Bailey?
Mr. Naruhodo, this perhaps isn't the place to discuss.
No, of course not. Can't mention it here. The fact that she killed Dr. John H. Wilson. Cyrus doesn't know, and it's very likely that the man was her father.
Asashin, we should let Father know at once.
Yes, I agree. Kazuma, isn't it? Kazuma Asogi. You say he's a friend of yours. My best friend. He's the whole reason I got to come to Britain. It's all on his merits. I have nothing but respect for him. Yes, I understand that only the very best students are selected for such opportunities. And I had a fine demonstration of how sharp he is in the proceedings earlier today. He missed nothing. In fact, his flawless performance very much reminded me of his father. Genshin Asogi, the professor. It's true that the aristocracy at the time was the root of numerous grave societal problems. They were abusing their power, playing with the common man as pawns in politics, in economics, in war. In many ways, Asogi was carving out a canker from society that we British couldn't deal with ourselves.
I see.
But that's precisely why it makes no sense. Clint Van Zieks was a noble and upstanding man. He wasn't corrupt. Why did that damn Nipponese have to go and take my brother's life? In spite of having once saved mine.
He saved your life? How did that happen?
It was 10 years ago, on a foggy night. What was to be the professor's final strike had sent a wave of panic through the capital.
So Clint Van Zieks had already been killed at this point then.
Genshin and I were walking down some back streets at a late hour. Of course, at that point, I had no idea of the true nature of the man at my side. All of a sudden...
Don't make a peep. You're coming with us.
We were surrounded. All of our assailants were armed with pistols, their faces obscured by scars. Clint was not only from noble heritage, he was a brilliant prosecutor as well. The scum of London hated the sight of him, and they had no sympathy for his younger brother Ira. I'd been targeted several times before already.
Yeah, Van Zieks alright. We got him.
I could hear them murmuring amongst themselves. I knew they were after me. But just when I thought my time had come, I let them kill you. Clint will never forgive me. It was Asogi's voice, just a whisper in my ear. After that, I don't remember exactly what happened. The next thing I knew, there was silence all around. Genshin lay on the cobbled street. Blood was seeping from his left hand. He'd shielded me. Two days later, they arrested him. On suspicion of being London's most notorious mass murderer ever, the Professor.
How awful for you.
All at once, I lost the brother I revered, and the foreign friend I held in such high regard.
I'm so sorry, Lord Van Zieks.
That's the end of my miserable tale. I never thought I'd recount it to anyone.
Well, thank you for confiding in me. The Professor, the Reaper, and Inspector Gregson. I wonder just how intimately related they all are. Still can't quite believe that Gregson was essentially the Reaper. Giving assassination orders to Jezebel Brett. Mr. Naruto, let's go and inform my father. I'm sure our government will want to hear about this new information. Oh, that means I get to meet your daddy, Susie. Hurrah!
Yes, alright. Let's head back to the Great Waterloo Hotel then. This is gonna be a meeting and a half, isn't it?
I thought it yesterday, and I think it again today. This place is so princely.
So I guess, but I have a feeling you'll think the same tomorrow too.
My tea is a finer fragrance than whatever they're serving in the tea room here, though, wouldn't you say?
Look who we have here. This is an unexpected pleasure.
Father. Oh, is this your daddy, Susie? How lovely.
What a charming young lady. And you are? Really? So you're the author of the Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, are you?
That's me, Iris Wilson, at your service, sir. Susie's been such a wonderful friend to me over the last year, you know.
Oh, Miss Wilson, I must say I read your work regularly, and with much interest.
Iris actually lives with Mr. Sholmes, you know, Father.
Is that so? Well, perhaps that goes some way to explaining that bright look in your eyes.
You wouldn't be so smiling so early if you knew just how bright she is, believe me.
Now then, young Naruhodo, it was a pleasure seeing you in action earlier. As an invitee to the symposium, I was allowed to observe from the gallery, after I twisted some arms. And I must say, it was a truly exemplary performance.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I'm fairly sure you admitted by Kazuma on the end there.
No. Please don't misunderstand me. It was you who impressed me.
Really?
You didn't miss a step against Asobi, and we all know how capable he is. Really, to have matured into such a fine defense lawyer in less than a year is quite extraordinary.
It's very kind of you to say so. Really nice to hear.
What I saw in court today confirmed what I'd been hoping for. The favor I mentioned yesterday, Naruhodo, I trust you haven't forgotten.
Oh, no, you did mention something, didn't you? But first, we have something to report, Father.
Of course. Shall we take tea while we discuss matters further?
I wonder where Judge Jacogo has got to. Father, do you know about the so-called Reaper at the Bailey?
I've heard rumors. Some members of the judiciary explained it all to me yesterday. Of course, when I was a visiting student here in London, the Reaper was yet to emerge.
Right, he didn't appear until after that case when the visiting students had already returned home.
Lord Van Zieks was in the doctor name. That was Baruch, the younger brother of Clint Van Zieks, I believe.
That's right. And he's known throughout London as the Reaper, as you've heard. But the truth is, it wasn't him behind all those mysterious deaths. It was somebody else.
I see. So what you're saying is there's been a professional killer at work here.
Exactly. Someone by the name of Assassin, in fact.
I beg your pardon. Did you say Assassin? You mean that Jezebel Brett woman who was responsible for killing my great friend?
Oh no, a friend of yours was killed?
Professor Mikotoba,
I think perhaps we shouldn't discuss this right now. The friend that Professor is talking about is Dr. John H. Wilson. That's not something we want Iris to find out about. Not like this, anyway. I've just remembered something. Biscuits. This hotel has the most delicious looking biscuits.
That was rather out of the blue.
She's doing this deliberately. I think I'll go and see if I can purchase some. I wonder, would you like to come too, Iris? Oh yes. You just tried to leave me behind.
So that young girl is called Iris Wilson, is she? Yes, that's right. And she's the author of all those adventure stories starring the great detective Sholmes. But the name of the credited author isn't Iris, is it? It's Dr. John H. Wilson. Yes, I know. That's the name of her father, you see. Her father. Dr. John H. Wilson. I was deeply indebted to the man for all the kindness he showed me during my time in London. That's why I was keen to reciprocate and invite him to the Imperial University 4 years ago. When he was murdered last year by Jezebel Brett. Why do I keep calling her Jezebel? Her name's Giselle. Jesus Christ. Why? Why would the hand of the Reaper stretch all the way to Japan? Iris knows nothing about the case. It seems very likely that the victim, Dr. Wilson, was her father. Well, I can't say that we ever spoke about his family, so I don't know if he had a daughter or not. All I think I can say with some certainty that he was never the great detective's partner. So, it could have been another Dr. Wilson, you think? Well, John and Wilson are both common names after all. Still, it's probably best not to mention this to the young lady until we can be sure. That's what we thought, yes.
We're back with cinnamon biscuits.
Oh, they smell delicious, Iris.
I think cinnamon will go very well with the tea they serve here, don't you, Susie? Yes, I'm sure you're right, Iris.
I haven't seen Judge Jikoku for a while, have you? Guilty. Guilty is still ringing in my ears. No, now you mentioned it, I haven't seen him since this morning either. I suppose since that symposium's opening was postponed, he'll have gone to explore the great exhibition.
That reminds me of something you mentioned yesterday. About Judge Jikoku having once been in the dock himself.
Ah yes, it was all tied up with that accursed trial. Close trial of Kazuma's father. Saishiro was trying to mitigate Genshin's guilt, so he took to the stand to testify. But he got a little carried away and actually managed to break the witness's stand.
Oh my.
He also said some contemptuous words about the British Empire for which he was charged. Oh dear. Though it's worryingly easy to imagine him doing that. Well, it was alright in the end. He was acquitted and we returned home to Japan together.
Thank goodness.
Ah yes, talking of Seishiro, I have a copy of the photograph we all took together here yesterday. Please.
Oh my. Oh, what a lovely picture.
Certainly seems to shout we've arrived in Britain. None of us had any idea what was coming when we took that, did we?
No, that's so true.
So, you mentioned a favour that you'd like to ask me. Well, this fateful trip that you're fighting, fateful trial that you're fighting, one way or another, it will be over before long. And when it is, I'd like you to accompany me back to Japan. You want me to do...
What? Father, what's the meaning of this?
Now, Susato, you should understand. You've seen how our courts work firsthand. Japan's judiciary system is in its infancy, especially when it comes to defense.
Oh, you mean...
The Supreme Court of Judica is in desperate need of a good defense lawyer. As soon as possible. Really quite urgently, in fact.
But I've not even been in London a year yet.
I've read all of Cesato's reports, and well aware of your extraordinary talents. And having seen you in action with my own eyes earlier today, there's no question. You, Naruhodo, are precisely the man our country needs.
So, you'd be leaving then, Runa? But then, what am I supposed to do, Father?
You came here to serve as Asogi's judicial assistant.
Yes, she's supposed to be Cosmo's assistant.
The government is still in the process of deciding how best to deal with this situation, though. You have always chosen your own path, Susanna, and I trust your judgment in this matter also.
Father,
Please, the pair of you, don't look so downcast. It's merely a suggestion, you understand? A hope, if I'm honest, but I won't force you. All I ask is that you consider it and come to a decision by the time this trial concludes.
yes, all right. You won't leave, will you, Runa?
That hadn't even crossed my mind.
Until now, I've just been trying to do what I believe to be Cosmo's will. Turns out that he's still alive, so where does that leave me?
Well, if you'll excuse me now, I need to telegram the government ministers and the Japanese police with this information about Asashin.
Of course, Father. Thank you.
I look forward to next month's installment, Miss Wilson.
Oh, good. And please, do come to Baker Street sometime, won't you? We'd love to entertain you.
I would be delighted. The best of luck for tomorrow, Naruhodo. And give my suggestion your full consideration, won't you?
Yes, I will. Going back home. You know, Kazuma's summer has always meant a great deal to my father. I'm sure he'd love the chance to meet with him and talk to him about all of this.
Yes, no doubt. Asashin. Of course, it's so obvious. How could I have neglected to consider the possibility before now? Mr. Shanks?
Ellie, where have you been?
Why, I joined you all for tea, of course. What an extraordinary question.
I didn't notice you at all.
No matter, no matter. Anyway, to more pressing concerns. Mr. Naruhodo.
Oh, yes?
I must dispatch a telegram to your country at once. It's a matter of much urgency.
To Japan, you mean?
Tell me, to whom can I entrust this task? Quickly now, who?
Well, my father has just now left to send a telegram to the Imperial Police Bureau of Japan himself.
I see. Well, he looks reliable enough for a bearded fellow.
I don't think what father sports could be considered a beard, Mr. Sholmes.
There's not a moment to lose. Kindly ask your trusty unshaven father to see this is sent.
I will, but what is it?
No questions at this time, if you please, Mr. Sano. All we can do is pray that for once, my deduction is awry.
Doesn't that imply that your deductions are normally correct, Mr. Sholmes? Which is exactly...
Now then. You may be surprised to learn that I am a very busy man. I certainly have no time to hide behind settees and eavesdrop on other people's conversations. So that's what joining us for tea meant. I leave the sending of this in your hands then, my dear fellows. Wait a minute, Mr. Sholmes.
He just sort of ran off, didn't he? At quite a pace.
Left the unpaid bill for his tea behind too.
I must catch up with Father at the telegraph office at once. And I'll run and call us a cab. Straight away.
That was me thinking everyone would be clamouring to pay Mr. Sholmes' bill. I suppose it... yeah, of course it wouldn't.
This is the ward where Mr. Vigil was brought, apparently.
To be frank, I'm a little worried about seeing him again. The lawyer. Hello again.
Are you feeling better now, Mr. Vigil?
Yes, thank you. Somewhat better. I'm sorry to have caused you to... I mean, it was because of me. If I hadn't exposed your secret and forced you to remember things, you'd obviously tried to forget. Prosecution. The prosecutor was here until a few moments ago too. You just missed him. Oh, Kazuma beat us to it. He said much the same as you. He was very apologetic. But the truth is, I brought this upon myself. Please, don't think like that. Keeping it from me being my wife all these years, I've carried such a sense of guilt. But that's not the worst of it. Over time, I obviously came to deceive myself as well.
You mean about your dismissal?
Looking back now, I'm beginning to think that perhaps Inspector Gregson didn't stumble across me by accident at all. I mean, he compensated me so generously for acting as his stand-in. He was clearly concerned for my well-being and doing what he could to help. So perhaps Gregson knew exactly what had become of Mr. Vigil all along then. I'm sure this is just desserts for 10 years of lies and deception, but... It wasn't me that helped the professor escape 10 years ago. It wasn't me. I swear it. I swear it's true.
Oh, Mr. Vigil.
I'm sure you'd rather not dredge up even more from your past at this time, but... if possible, could you tell us exactly what really happened? I want to. I need to get all this off my chest. I just want someone to tell me what I should have done. Inspector Gregson was obviously engaged in a special operation of some sort. He was investigating something that even Scotland Yard couldn't know about. Details of the Reaper's marks, yes. It was when he had to carry out those investigations that I would take his identification and impersonate him. You would pretend to be the inspector and carry out investigations on his behalf. Oh no, never. A common street peddler couldn't possibly carry out a proper police investigation. All I would do is go to the specified location and make a little hoo-ha. Just something to leave an impression, so everyone there would think a detective called Gregson was here.
So, that's what you were doing on the day prior to the incident?
Yes, he asked me to make an appearance at the park on Lime Street for the Red-Headed League event. So as usual, I flashed the inspector's identification around and was very vocal about my presence.
But then you were taken prisoner by those red-headed fraudsters.
Yes. So, you would always make a point of showing Gregson's identification and generally being loud. That's what the inspector asked me to do, yes.
Well, that's one way of becoming a legendary detective, I suppose. Not a good one, though.
And as you know, I suffered this bruising around my neck at their hands. But the following day they kept their word and released me. Without returning the inspector's identification to you, however. We had arranged to meet in Fresno Street, room at 5 that day so I could report back to the inspector. But at the agreed time, that's when I heard the gunshot. It was at midnight on 17th of June 10 years ago. That was the time scheduled for the execution. But the professor's execution never actually took place, did it?
Or rather, the execution itself must have been used to effect the plan of escape. I hardly dare to imagine what a chilling plan it was.
Berkeley was renowned for being the highest security prison in the country. Everything that went in or out of the place was searched multiple times. But there was one notable exception. Or rather, one notable loophole, something that was never questioned. I have a feeling I know what that loophole was now. The coffins into which the bodies of the executed convicts were placed, correct? Yes. Once the coroner had confirmed the death of a condemned convict, the body was taken in its coffin for immediate burial in Nogate Cemetery just behind the prison. The chief warder had first had to sign the necessary papers. And after that, no member of staff was permitted to touch the coffin containing the body again. When executions took place, only the executioner and the coroner were permitted inside the chamber. I would wait in the adjacent room for word that the condemned convict was dead. On that occasion, once I had that confirmation, I went into the mortuary to find a lone coffin as usual. The procedure was that I would sign the paperwork having checked the coffin, then nail it shut. But for some reason that day, the coffin was already nailed shut.
No.
I didn't think anything of it at the time. I assumed that my deputy must have checked the coffin and nailed it shut before I arrived. So, you mean the coffin contained... Yes, I can only imagine that Asogi, having escaped his execution somehow, was alive inside the coffin. The coffin was then taken out through the main gates and deposited in Lowgate Cemetery.
Presumably, there wouldn't have been enough air inside to breathe for long.
So in the early hours following the burial, someone dug up the coffin again to set Genshin free.
But in the end, he was fatally shot in the graveyard anyway. What on earth really happened in Lowgate Cemetery that night, I wonder?
I'm afraid I really don't know. All I can say with certainty are two things. Sogi couldn't possibly have escaped that way without help from somebody working in the prison. And that somebody was not me. obviously you knew the man then. The professor, I mean. Genshin Asogi.
Yes, I remember him well, in fact.
Would you mind telling us what you know?
Well, having been condemned to death as he was, any contact I had with the man was short, obviously. After that trial, which was carried out behind closed doors, attended only by elite members of the judiciary, they called for his execution to be carried out at the earliest possible opportunity.
The outcome of the trial was set from the beginning, wasn't it?
It was a time of delicate diplomacy, when Britain and Japan were in the process of signing an important treaty. That meant that this potentially destabilizing case had to be dealt with swiftly and discreetly. The man had less than a week in total. As I was the chief warder, I oversaw his sort stay in the cells until his final hour. I remember being struck deeply by his noble character and incredible resilience.
What do you mean exactly?
He was a killer of many men, but he was always quiet and polite. He was a gentleman and a man of intellect. In fact, I couldn't bring myself to believe what he'd done, so I asked him one day. Those 5 members of the aristocracy whose lives were taken, were you really responsible?
I'm guilty of the unforgivable crime of ending another human's life, yes.
The following day, the closed trial took place, and the verdict was no surprise.
Guilty.
That night, when he was brought back to his cell, I saw something unusual.
Something unusual? What?
The last will and testament of Genshin Asogi. As I said, it was on the night following his trial after he'd been found guilty. I was doing the rounds of the cells, and when I looked into Asogi's, I noticed that he seemed to have a sheet of paper in his hand.
His last will and testament then, presumably.
As soon as he noticed me, he hurriedly shoved it behind his back. But why did you find that so unusual? Isn't it normal for a man to pen a will when he knows his death is nigh? Yes, that's true, but there were special conditions to Asogi's incarceration, you see.
What sort of conditions?
Well, even though he was held in a cell designed for condemned inmates, he was allowed to keep his personal effects with him, with one exception.
Really? He was allowed his things?
That is unusual, certainly. Of course, he'd been convicted of killing 5 members of the aristocracy. But at the same time, he was a guest in our country from the Empire of Japan. The powers that be were determined that his final days shouldn't be needlessly uncomfortable. And what was the exception you mentioned to the personal effects he was allowed? That's the point. He wasn't permitted to have writing materials. Specifically, no pens or paper. So, he was prevented from leaving any written record of what had happened to him. Yes, that was the long and short of it. I've no idea where he obtained that paper. Any writing materials would have been confiscated from him upon his incarceration. As I said, he hid the paper behind his back and then he pleaded with me. What did you just hide behind your back?
Please turn a blind eye. This is my lifeline.
But you know it's against the rules.
You're the only person who's seen. It's if you just agree to keep quiet.
Alright then, but what's on that paper?
A last will and testament. This will is the only weapon I have left now. How could a will be a weapon? So I decided to pretend I'd seen nothing, and I let him keep his will. But then later, it just seemed to vanish without trace. What? What do you mean it vanished?
It would seem that isn't the end of the story of this mysterious will.
I was the only person who saw Asogi's will, but somehow it disappeared. It was after Asogi's execution.
Which was actually an elaborate jailbreak.
The warders gathered up Asogi's possessions that were in his cell. They were all to be sent back to his family home in Japan, you see.
To poor Kazuma-sama.
And you're saying that it wasn't anywhere to be found among his personal effects? Will, I mean. That's right. Though I didn't search through them myself. And Governor Cardin was livid. He was screaming, "It can't have disappeared completely."
That doesn't quite make sense though, does it?
In what way?
Well, we've understood that only Mr. Vigil was aware of the will's existence. In which case, how did the prison governor know to look for it?
Oh yes, you're right.
I really don't know how he knew. It certainly seemed as though he knew of the will's existence from the outset. Only he didn't refer to it as a will. What he said was... the Asogi papers.
The Asogi papers?
I really can't tell you anything of the subsequent events. Because, well, of what happened.
Your dismissal and the way you blocked it all from your memory.
I'd forgotten all this until today. I don't suppose it's relevant to the case, though.
Well, anyway, thank you very much for sharing it with us, Mr. Vigil. We're very grateful.
I'm afraid there's really little more I can tell you. My wife Evie will be here shortly, so I do hope I don't appear rude, but...
No, not at all. Thank you.
But what will become of you now? Well, impersonating a police officer is a criminal offence, of course. I imagine that once I'm fully recovered, I shall be arrested.
I'm so sorry.
Don't be, please. This was all my own doing. I always knew that this day would come.
Well, I wish you well. Goodbye, Mr. Vigil.
Ah! Before you go, there's just one thing.
Oh, yes? What is it?
The Asogi papers. I'd be very grateful if you'd make no mention of the things I told you about them.
Presumably for some good reason.
It's my understanding that their very existence is a closely guarded secret. If it became known that I'd remembered, well, it could be rather troublesome, I think.
I understand. Some sort of will that Genshin Asogi penned just before his death, which the man himself claimed was his last weapon. I wonder, perhaps it had something to do with his plan to escape. If there's anyone who might know more about a document that Kazuma's father left behind,
will be Mr. Vigil's governor. Then we know precisely where we must go. Back to Berkeley Prison.
Back again, are you? Yes, hello. I heard all about your investigations. I read the report just now. You found him, eh, Vigil?
Yes, luckily.
Well, anywho, the laddie doesn't work here no more, so your case is not to do with Berkeley. I wouldn't like you to get the wrong idea about that.
Of course, yes. Mr. Vigil stopped working here 10 years ago now, so... Yes, we've seen its dismissal notice, haven't we? He was given the job.
Ah, you can very well. So how about a wee handcuff biscuit?
Oh, they really are like little handcuffs, and as hard as irons too.
So, what brought you down here today? Here today?
There's something else we'd like to ask you about, actually.
Is that so?
I believe there might have been a document that disappeared from Gensis Asogi's cell. I think it's been called the Asogi Papers or something.
Did I not say Gregson's death is not to do with things that might have happened to Berkeley? Leave the past in the past, laddie. Let's not footer about with irrelevant details.
His expressions changed completely. We're clearly onto something here.
That murderer's botched execution and the whole miserable escape. They were Berkeley's darkest hour, aye. A shocking embarrassment.
Because the convict had a collaborator on the prison staff, you mean?
Aye, for shame. The coroner confirmed the death of the man after his execution, Courtney Scythe. And my chief ward at the time, Vigil, who was in charge of the whole affair.
But Mr. Vigil says he didn't know anything about it.
The rascal wouldn't say otherwise, eh? More handcuffs?
Oh, how could I say no? You can never have too much iron in your diet. When Mr. Vigil was handed his dismissal notice as a result of what had happened, he was so despairing he jumped out of your office window, didn't he?
Didn't you like to say? But that's just Vigil trying to get out of it. Do you not think he wouldn't have jumped from the shock of his crimes being exposed, eh? I do.
You wouldn't say otherwise, though, would you?
Of course, I can't shun all responsibility myself. I shouldn't have let him deceive me. Naturally, there's barely anybody that kens what went on at that time now. Gregson having been murdered and Dr. Scythe forbidden from having any visitors.
No visitors? Someone obviously doesn't want her giving anything away. Well, we're not going home empty-handed.
And I wouldn't dream of you sending packing with not Kimmer. Here, take a handcuff or two.
Oh well, it would be rude to say no. Wouldn't want to become anemic. Anemic. There.
I suppose if there's anybody who might still ken about what happened back then, it'd be that lass from the forensic division, Maria Gorey.
Maria Gorey?
Aye, Scythe's daughter. She didn't have no more, just the one. but the wee bairns followed in her mamma's footsteps. You didn't ever see her with your disciple in her hand. Ah.
Mama, what is this?
Where did she spring from? Did she just call the doctor Mama? Dr. Syme's daughter, Maria Gorey. We could do with talking to her. So, she's Dr. Syme's daughter, but her surname is Gorey? Aye, there's some family history, I'm sure, but I didn't ken the ins and outs of it. She grew up watching her mama work with the bodies of folk who died in strange circumstances, and decided to do the same with her own life. Any understanding myself.
And she was driven by a deep respect for her mother.
Perhaps. Anywho, she was in charge of Gregson's autopsy, I believe. Right, and the coroner responsible for this incomplete report. Someone told me once that the wee lassie always loved her mama's stories about cutting up bodies. There's even a rumour that she used to listen to the funeral march as a lullaby.
Well then, perhaps her mother might have told her about the autopsy from the case 10 years ago.
Aye, I'd say there's a fighting chance at least. After all, that was a life-changing case for all of us. I really need to speak with Miss Gorey herself about all this, I think. Well, thank you very much. I'm not happy about any part of this. It took years for Londoners to finally get the whole professor business. Can you not go in up on this, laddie? Stop asking pointless questions. Sorry, I don't like trudging up these painful memories for everyone. Can you not just stay away, no? Leave me alone and then come back here, eh? How do you come to kin about that, laddie? There's no many folk who even here in the prison who've heard of those papers. Well, come tell him Mr. Vigil told me.
I'm afraid our sources must remain confidential, sir.
We've been led to believe the papers are actually a last will and testament. Is that right? The professors, or rather Genshin Asogi's. Aye, that's right. You were informed, Jimmy. That's the end of the silent treatment. But then after the convict's execution, it mysteriously vanished from his cell, didn't it? He was no rough-out half-cock there. I think you didn't quite get your facts straight. It was there in his cell, exactly where it should have been. Huh? What we had elsewhere? Let me just have a wee hook around in here. I'm sure I can find it. Ah, here you are. See? Last will and testament of Genshin Asogi, written with a calligraphy brush. Of course, I can't read a word of those Japanese squiggles. But I mind it says he leaves all his worldly possessions to his son back in his own land.
Yes, that's correct. That's the gist of it.
So these are the Asogi papers? Aye, of course they are. Papers written by Asogi, no doubt about it. There's no mystery here, laddie. That's your lot. After all, the stramash of that skin sliced. After all the stramash of that sliced of an execution, he sent the man's possessions back to his clan in Japan, And that was the end of it.
I think we ought to make a record of this, Mr. Naruhodo, just in case.
One thing before you go on your way, Mr. Naruhodo. Oh, yes? Those papers are not to do with Gregson's death. I'd prefer if you didn't make no mention of them outside this office, or rather, I wouldn't just prefer it. Consider it an order from the highest level of our government.
I understand.
No arguments, Professor Osogi. No arguments, Prosecutor Osogi. You will continue with the trial exactly as I instructed. Is that clear? Perfectly.
Kazuma-sama.
Defying Lord Stronghold by the sound of it. He never did know when to back down. On your way now, Osogi. My lord.
Kazuma?
Without saying a word. Yes, what are you doing here?
Oh, well, just hoping to ask you a few questions, if you wouldn't mind.
I wanted Van Zeek's trial concluded today. The prosecutor Osogi's unwelcome inquiries are going to make it take longer than necessary.
Unwelcome inquiries?
As a result, I'm losing even more precious time. Currently 2 hours, 55 minutes and 41 seconds. 42, 43...
Then we must resolve everything before 3 hours have passed, Mr. Naruhodo.
In a miraculous not even 5 minutes.
Anyway, I can't let the man's obvious bad mood put me off. I need information. Does Prosecutor Osogi believe that Lord Van Zeeks is the Reaper?
I wouldn't know. It was 10 years ago in that fateful closed trial that Lord Van Zeeks made a name for himself among the judiciary. But the next trial he fought, he lost. It meant the ringleader of the criminal organization was acquitted, next to all the jurors being under duress.
That's awful.
And the man's freedom was short-lived. He lasted just 3 days.
Yes, let me see. He died in a rock slide at the place of work. At his place of work, I believe.
Correct. And that was the inauguration of the Reaper of the Baby.
And people believed Lord Van Zeeks was responsible?
He was brought to trial himself, but it was shown to have been an accident.
So he must have had a solid alibi then.
Nevertheless, the mysterious deaths continued. In total, 16 persons perished in unusual circumstances, obstetrically at the hand of the Reaper. And that's a long run of coincidences.
Well, the Reaper's true identity may well be revealed by this trial.
and the impact that revelation would have on the British public cannot be underestimated.
Is that why it's a closed trial?
Precisely. And this country hasn't seen a closed trial for 10 years.
So the last one was the professor's, the trial of Genshin Isugi.
Correct.
Actually, we heard that originally. You were going to prosecute that trial yourself, Lord Strongheart.
Van Zieks entreated me to relinquish the prosecution to him, that he might avenge his brother's death. And here we are, 10 years later. And the son of the man Van Zieks had condemned, now looking to avenge his father's death in the same way.
You do say that what goes around comes around.
However, it would seem that the new young prosecutor is harboring some ulterior motive as well.
Kazuma is?
I'd like my organization to run smoothly in the exact manner that I prescribe. As with the giant clock in here, I won't tolerate a single cog being out of step with the others.
So that's what all these gears are about in here.
If the young man refuses to mesh with the other parts of my great machine, I will be forced to take steps.
What do you mean?
Not something with which you need concern yourself. In any case, all your questions will be answered tomorrow. Now, I shall have to ask you to excuse me. As of this moment, I've been delayed from attending my next meeting by precisely 3 hours.
Oh my, that is a long time.
And I hold you entirely responsible.
Even though we were actors, he managed to fit everything into not even 5 minutes. I wonder if you might agree to us, talking with Prosecutor Asogi?
Discussions between the defense and the prosecution outside of the courtroom are generally frowned upon. However, I will make an exception in this case. Now go. You can find him in his office.
Oh, thank you. Let's go to see him at once, Mr. Naruto. Kazuma's my best friend in the world, but I'm really not all that sure I know him how to talk to him at the moment. Oh, this is the office of Prosecutor Asogi now, is it? Kazuma-sama is doing so well for himself. Even though he's always forced to kneel on the floor Japanese style in that dark corner. It's his habit to sit Sizer style whenever he's working. Kazuma.
I thought it wouldn't be long before you paid me a visit, Ryunosuke. I was right about what I said, wasn't I?
Sorry?
That you have all the markings of a great defense lawyer.
Well, I always believed that you'd fulfill your dream of advocating in the British courts. Just never imagined for 1 second that it would be as a prosecutor. Seeing you stand in a foreign courtroom so gallantly, realizing your dream, Kazuma-sama. I'm truly happy for you.
I'm. I'm, 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 Ryunosuke, I always thought it would be fun for you and I to shake up the British legal system a little together. This isn't quite how I envisioned it, but I suppose it's just another twist of fate. I've learned a lot of things during my time in London. Perhaps Asada-san's father was himself a visiting student here once, along with Judge Drakoku. And about what happened with your father. Then you'll have no difficulty understanding why I had no choice, why I had to find a way to get to Britain as a visiting student myself. I want to hear it from you, Kazuma. As you wish, Ryunosuke Naruhodo. It's getting on for a year now. That's what happened on the SS Briar. We headed across the oceans from Japan to Great Britain. And a bizarre series of coincidences led to those tragic events. I thought I'd lost my best friend forever. I must have been unconscious for a long time. When I awoke, I was lying on a bed. It was a narrow little room. There was a posy of flowers by the pillow. It took me a little while to realise that I was in the cabin of a ship. I slipped out of the room and headed up onto the deck. Were you already suffering from amnesia at that point? Yes, I didn't know what had happened or where I was. There was just this voice in my head. It was something you have to do, something no one else can know about. Go to Great Britain, your task awaits you there. It was a calling I couldn't ignore. It compelled me relentlessly. Out on deck I saw that I was on a huge steamship, and we were docked in a large port.
It must have been Hong Kong.
Yes, it must have been. Presumably just before they were due to carry your body off the ship. I had no idea of the situation, but I did have the feeling that this was in some way my last chance. So I concealed myself among the disembarking passengers and went ashore. Then I disappeared into the crowded streets of that foreign port city, so I could plan my onward journey to Great Britain. Just under a year ago, with all my past memories lost to me, I was left behind in Hong Kong. Everything was foreign to me, the sights, the sounds, the smells. I had reeled. I was truly at a loss. I realized now that I had escaped as a dead man, with nothing but the clothes on my back. No money, of course.
Oh, how terrifying for you.
Luckily though, I had 2 feathers in my cap. One being your knowledge of English, I suppose. That's right. And on the back of that I was able to pick up some work as a deckhand on a cargo ship. Eventually, after calling at countless ports, I finally arrived at Dover. It must have been some 3 months ago now. Your formidable tenacity of purpose showing itself again. I mean, the man had lost his memory and had literally nothing to his name. He still managed to make his way to London on the opposite side of the world. Of course, I have no idea why I'd moved heaven and earth to get here at that point. So, how did you end up becoming Lord Van Zeek's apprentice then? That can only be called an extraordinary stroke of luck, really. You see, I was stopped at the border because I had no papers. They took me straight to Scotland Yard. By sheer coincidence, Lord Strongheart was there to attend a meeting. That's when the second feather in my cap came into play.
Would that have been your knowledge of the law?
Yes, exactly. Lord Strongheart was curious about an Easterner with intimate knowledge of British law. He took me back with him to the Supreme Court and assigned me to the prosecutor's office. And then 9 days ago... Finally got your memory back after the trial involving Drebber. Yes, I did. Ever since I first met you at Yume, you talked about your dream. Mark my words, Ryunosuke. I'll be chosen as a visiting student and make my way to Great Britain someday. Did you know the entire time about what happened to your father here? 16 years ago. And my father left on that exciting trip to Great Britain. I was just a boy. We took a photograph together the day before his departure. It's my last memory of him. But what I remember most about my father is his unswerving sense of justice. 6 years after he left, a gentleman called at our family home. He told me that Genshin, my father, had been taken ill in England and passed away. It was Professor Mikotoba, your father, Susato-san.
Oh my.
Ever since then, the professor was very good to me. He even helped to fund my university education at Yume. I'll be forever in his debt. But nevertheless, I just couldn't bring myself to believe what he told me.
Oh.
Then one day, a letter arrived at our house from Britain. There was no indication of the sender, so I opened it assuming it was from an old acquaintance of my father. What I read in that letter changed my entire life.
What did it say?
It said that my father had been a mass murderer, and the writer cursed the Asogi name.
Oh no.
As a result of that letter, I found out what had been hidden from me all those years. Presumably the letter was sent from a relative of one of the victims. If whoever it was had been a member of the judiciary, he could have been present at the closed trial. The letter revealed that my father had been sentenced to death, executed for being a killer.
I'm so sorry you had to find out that way.
I imagine the British government did its very best to silence whoever sent that letter. But someone who knew the truth and could bear the resentment was always going to be a problem.
But still, it could have been written by anyone. Why would you believe such a thing?
There was a newspaper cutting included with the letter. It was the first I'd ever heard of the professor and his terrible killing spree.
Well, what did my father have to say about the letter?
I couldn't bring myself to show it to him. What? Why not? Because he deliberately concealed the truth from me by telling me my father was taken by a fatal illness. That couldn't have been easy for him, and he'd done it out of consideration for my feelings. So instead, I showed the letter to Judge Jikoku.
To the other visiting student.
He faltered for the briefest of moments, but then he just laughed the letter off. But in that moment I saw it on his face. He was undeniably shocked, shaken momentarily, before recovering his pose. A year later, my bereaved mother succumbed to the strain of grief, and she too passed away. That's when I made up my mind that one day, without fail, I would cross the seas to Britain and seek the truth for myself. The truth about my father, Genshin Asogi. And I wouldn't let anyone stand in my way.
Oh, Kazuma-sama.
What we learned today in court turned things completely on their head. It was an impressive piece of lore in Ryunosuke, Naruhodo.
Lord Van Zeeks isn't the Reaper, you know. I almost don't want to believe it myself, but it turns out that Inspector Gregson himself, the victim, was.
It's clear that the Inspector was behind the Reaper's activity all along.
What? You mean, you knew?
The real question is who's been given orders to the Inspector. Yes, Barak Van Zeeks is the real Reaper. And I know that 10 years ago it was him who decided my father must be a mass murderer and sent him to his grave.
No, he was merely seeing that justice was done as the law dictates. He's not to blame.
Ultimately, it's people who condemn people. The law is just a tool they use to do it. And when a man condemns another, he must take responsibility for his actions. Of course he must. But I know for certain that my father would never have taken another man's life.
Kazuma.
On the contrary, my father's life was taken by the Reaper.
This came up in the trial, didn't it? That's something a little dubious, I mean. The fact that no time of death was recorded in Inspector Gregson's autopsy report.
Yes, there were some unexpected turns in the courtroom earlier. And the suggestion you came up with certainly took everyone by surprise. The idea that the victim died the previous day at some other location is quite something.
Well, considering when the pocket watch had stopped and there's scorch marks on the candle, it's certainly a distinct possibility. The evidence in the scene both point to it.
To be honest, it bothered me too. So I paid a visit to the autopsy room earlier. The coroner responsible wasn't there, but I got a name. It's Dr. Gorey.
If it wouldn't trouble you, Kazuma-sama, we'd very much like to speak with the coroner too.
Of course, the last thing I want is for anything to be brushed under the carpet. Scotland Yard's autopsy laboratory is behind Lowgate Cemetery.
Lowgate Cemetery? Like Barclay Prison, you mean?
Ah, you know it, do you? The prison where my father was incarcerated and robbed of his life.
Kazuma-sama.
Well, thank you. I'll pay a visit to the laboratory later today. Ryunosuke, I want to thank you. What for? For this. You safeguarded the soul of the Asogi clan.
Well, it's a famous sword that's been in your family for generations. My only slight regret is that I never got the chance to draw it before I returned it to you.
Kuruma is said to have been forged by a master swordsmith during the Sengoku Warring States period. I come from a long lineage of warriors, many of whom were expert swordsmen.
Well then, you're a chip off the old block, I'd say.
This blade, Kuruma, is the symbol of the Asogi clan's honor and might. Apparently one of my father's apprentices even took the blade's name for a surname.
Really? Kuruma? That sounds formidable, that's for sure.
16 years ago, when my father was a visiting student here in London, he had this sword forever at his side. Which is why it means so much to me that I have it by my side again now, too. And that is all thanks to you. was an honor. Now, I have preparations to make for tomorrow. Perhaps I said a little too much. Kazuma, you've changed. No, Ryunosuke, I haven't changed at all. It's you who's changed. I can completely understand your resentment of Lord Van Zeeks given what happened. The fact is, those events in this case are, well, unrelated. Is that what you want to say? How can you be so sure? What do you mean? Never mind. That man is the Reaper, and it's for that reason that the Inspector was killed. I'm going to prove as much in court tomorrow, by whatever means necessary. Can't let you do that, Kazuma. I know you'll do what you have to as a lawyer. Well, I'm sure I don't need to tell you, but I won't be taking any prisoners in the courtroom. I expect nothing less. Until tomorrow, then, in the Old Bailey. This place really is creepy, isn't it?
Well, being a dead room, it's probably full of the spirits of the dissected. But actually, there's a rather pleasing scent of roses in the air. Well, being a dead room, the coroner probably needs a bold scent like that to mask the odor of death.
Iris? Do you think we could change the subject?
What was that?
Dr. Gory?
What?
That noise before.
I was sharpening my tools. I'd be dead meat if I didn't keep a perfectly keen edge on them.
Right.
When following the collagen fibers in the dermis, an expertly sharpened scalpel cuts like cheese. Would you like a demonstration? Oh yes, please. I'd love to see. Then, I think you'll do nicely.
No, I wouldn't do nicely at all. I mean, maybe some other time? Is that a tut? Well, we came here to ask questions, so... We've actually met before. I'm a lawyer, if you remember.
You're not dead yet.
What?
So Mama said I wasn't to cut you open. She's so strict about things like that.
Well, good. Just like has some scruples, at least.
Oh dear. It looks like she's not interested in talking to us for the time being, anyway.
For the time being, you mean? Until we die. Yeah, that's a way off. Sorry, but I wasn't planning on dying anytime soon. Surely there's some less drastic way of making medicine. Dr. Gory, we actually came here to ask you about this.
He was very good.
Good? Sorry?
His skin didn't sag. His skin didn't snag my blade once, and very little mess. His joints dislocated easily, and his muscle tissue was a pleasure to work with.
We can skip those details. But there is one thing about the report that's caught my attention. You don't seem to have recorded a time of death.
That's not my fault.
Oh, that made me jump.
Then, please, tell us what happened.
So, why doesn't this autopsy report include the victim's time of death then? It's really the most crucial detail.
I was told not to write it.
What? By who?
Mal Strongheart, the Lord Chief Justice. He came here.
Lord Strongheart came?
He said that from the witness statements about the gunshot and the other evidence it was obvious. The man clearly died at 5 p.m. on the 1st of November, when the gunshot was heard. But that's not the time of death you wrote on the report. You didn't write anything. Was there some reason you didn't include it?
Dr. Gory, you're hiding something under Lord Strongheart's instructions. And sooner or later you're going to go the same way as your mother.
Give it here, then.
She's scribbling so furiously.
There.
You've written...
What's she written? Tell us.
Indeterminate.
But...
What do you mean by that? Why was the time of death indeterminate?
When the specimen was brought in, it was still fresh. So the time of death could easily have coincided with when the gunshot was heard. But there was one small discrepancy.
What discrepancy?
There was some fried fish in the pocket of the specimen's overcoat. And that fish had started to rot.
What?
If the victim liked fried fish, he presumably liked to eat it before it went off.
Oh, yes. What are you trying to say?
It's possible that someone tried to manipulate the apparent time of death.
Manipulate that? Is that even possible to do?
Theoretically, if you were to chill the body in ice, you could delay the onset of putrefaction. And if the overcoat wasn't on the body at the time,
then only the fish would have started to rot.
With today's science, it's not yet possible to determine if the body was chilled or not.
Today's science is advanced enough to let you freeze a corpse, it seems.
But surely, to chill a corpse like that would require an enormous electrical refrigerator. I don't imagine many households in London are equipped with such a device. No, definitely not. But maybe in a factory or some other special places? I don't recall seeing any factories or such like on Fresno Street, though. I wonder if the inspector's body had been chilled somehow. What might the actual time of death have been? I couldn't say for sure. But at the most, it might have been a day earlier.
No.
In other words, it would corroborate your previous deduction, Mr. Naruto. And Inspector Gregson was killed a day before his body was discovered, at a different location.
Did you inform Lord Strongheart of this possibility?
He simply said that there was no electrical refrigerators of that size in the vicinity.
Oh, yes, one other thing. It's something the governor of Berkeley prison told us. He said that your mother, Dr. Scythe, was responsible for confirming the death of the professor after his execution.
The professor.
Apparently you always enjoyed listening to your mother's stories about her work, so we were wondering if you might know something about what happened 10 years ago.
That's not all Mama did.
Sorry?
My Mama carried out the autopsy of Clint Van Zinks as well.
What? Really? Lord Van Zinks, the professor's final victim.
The idea of carrying out an autopsy on a member of the aristocracy was completely unthinkable back then. But the detective in charge of the investigation insisted, and it was miraculously authorized. The detective being Inspector Gregson, of course.
Quite an accomplishment for one man.
That autopsy provided the vital clue needed to arrest the killer. And Mama was there for that historic event.
What does all this mean?
You know that amazing autopsy happened right here in this very room. The professor and Clint Van Zinks. They both spent their final moments before their burial on that dissection table there. So this lab's, Mama's lab, was instrumental in some of the country's most important events.
She really is proud of her mother. I wonder if you tell us more about exactly what happened back then, Dr. Gorey.
The professor's execution was Mama's first big case. She had to be in attendance at Berkeley Prison's execution chamber and sign the certificate to confirm the convict's death. Mama is the best coroner in the world, you know. I was so proud of her.
But the execution didn't actually take place.
No, and worse still, Mama actually helped with the jailbreak. I didn't want to know. Oh dear. You found out recently, you mean? I believed in her, in Mama, but now I wonder if I'm starting down the same path as her.
You mean because you omitted the time of death on this autopsy report? That's because Lord Strongheart forbade you from including it.
Just like Mama, I'm sure she was coerced by somebody too.
Yes, that's my feeling as well.
There's no doubt that there were powerful forces at play 10 years ago. The execution couldn't have been staged without a lot of people at the prison knowing about it. Obviously, the prison governor must have been in on it as well. That big man with the little handcuffs, according to what he told us. He was tricked by the chief warder. He says he knew nothing about it. Of course he said that. I'd say the same thing.
Just who was behind that jailbreak all those years ago? You mentioned the autopsy of Clint Van Zinks.
It was at the time when carrying out autopsies of murder victims was very unusual. It's still not a practice that's observed in our country, even now. It turned out that he was the professor's final victim, and when the autopsy was performed, Mama was present, although only as the secondary assistant. The person leading the procedure was called Dr. John H. Wilson. That's right, my daddy. And there was one other person present, the primary assistant. He was a visiting student from the Far East.
Wait, a visiting student?
Must have been my father, Eugene Mikatoba.
Why did Professor Mikatoba had been involved in something so important?
But the outcome of that historic autopsy, was the discovery of a vital piece of evidence that led to the capture of the professor.
So that's how they came to identify Genshin Masugi as the infamous mass murderer. Do you happen to know anything about that piece of evidence? Can you tell us any more?
Would you like to see the records for yourself?
Would that be alright?
What's the point of keeping records if people can't look at them? They're filed under V at the back of those cupboards, with the other records from the last decade.
Thank you. Let's see. Van Zeeks. That's strange.
What, Mr. Naruto?
They aren't here. There's nothing under Van Zeeks.
There must be.
Somebody took them away.
No one's allowed to take documents related to the professor case out of this room. But you're right, they're gone.
Oh, when was the last time somebody looked at them? Do you remember?
It was... Oh yes, I remember now. It was 2 years ago. The consulting detective came one day, saying that he'd like to see the records.
No, you don't mean...
Herlock Sholmes was his name.
Deep down, I knew that was coming.
Do you think he stole the records? Oh no, surely not. Iris, that can't be right, can it?
Iris?
Bruno. I hope you don't mind, but
What is it, Iris?
I just remembered something very important I have to do. I'm going to have to leave you now. Oh, this is very sudden, Iris. Well, we'll come with you then. Oh no, there's no need. You and Reno can take your time here. Bye for now then. Good luck.
Wait a minute, little girl.
Me? I remember now. You've been here before, haven't you?
Have you, Iris?
Yes, 2 years ago when that detective came. You were with him, weren't you? You were a living specimen then too.
That's the way it usually works, yes.
Was I? I really don't remember. Anyway, sorry, but I must dash.
Wait, Iris?
I'll brew up a pot for you when you get home.
What's the matter with her? She's behaving rather strangely all of a sudden. Well, in that case, we won't keep you any longer either.
It's been quite a while since I had any visitors. This was really fun. But next time you come, I prefer it if you were ready for dissection.
Can't make any promises, sorry. Yeah, it's a bit strange that the records of Clint Van Zeek's autopsy had disappeared. I think we've asked all we came to ask her now. Police are still busily investigating in here then.
But Gina's nowhere to be seen. Where is she?
Yes, it's been blissfully quiet, hasn't it? She's out investigating on her own. Practicing with a bus stalker.
Well, I expect she'll be back before too long. Shall we wait?
Actually, there's something different about this room since the last time we were here, isn't there?
We could always use the time to investigate more thoroughly.
This little trunk wasn't here before, was it?
Oh, it appears to be made of metal. It must be very heavy. I wonder to whom it belongs. There are some initials on the outside, look. TG.
Let's ask one of the policemen if they know how it came to be here.
Oi, what do you think you're doing? That's my trunk, that is. Hands off! Gina.
Where were you hiding?
I don't know. You leave something unattended for a few seconds, and every Tom, Dick and Harry's got his greedy eyes on it.
Just a wild guess, Gina, but
What? Spit it out, Odo.
is it fair to say that you've only owned this trunk since this morning's trial?
What? What are you trying to say? Come on, this trunk goes with me everywhere. Always has. Where have you been last year?
Yeah, try not to incur your wrath, mainly.
You should hear them talking at the yard now. They should be ashamed of themselves. And they're saying that it was the boss who killed all them burglars. Bludgers.
Yeah. Ah, you mean the whole Reaper thing?
Yeah. Apparently the boss was investigating stuff that no one else at the yard knew nothing about. Stuff to do with all them criminals what got off scot-free.
Yes, the ones prosecuted by Lord Manzeeks who used bribery and corruption to evade conviction.
Well then, obviously, it was that bloomin' Reaper giving the orders, weren't it?
But why would people be suspecting Inspector Gregson instead of Inspector Gregson of being involved in the killings?
There was a notebook hidden in his office.
Oh no, this doesn't sound good.
It had details about all the crimes that had been pegged as the Reaper's work.
What?
No. Did you see it, Gina? Did you see the notebook? They wouldn't flaming let me, because I'm just an apprentice apparently. But it was me who found it. And he was my boss. That's right. I was pretty miffed about it, so I sneaked a peek at what it said anyway. Oh,
That's our Gina. So, you managed to see what was written in Gregson's secret notebook anyway, did you?
way I see it, it's my right to read what he wrote. And what had he written, Gina? Dates, times, places, names, and a whole long list of them. All details about the bludgers supposed to have been done in by the Reaper. But there could be an explanation for that. Perhaps it was a record of the Inspector's investigations into the Reaper's activities. Exactly, that's what I said. That's the first thing you'd think, right? As it happens, it was full of names I recognised anyway.
Well, the Reaper's targets were almost exclusively known leaders of London's criminal underworld.
Oh yeah, but there was one name right at the end that was a bit odd.
At the end of the list, you mean?
I'm pretty sure the date against it was 31st of October. The day before the Inspector was found dead.
So, what was the old name?
It weren't like a name I ever seen before. It was something like, Nah, it's no good. I can't remember it. Well, I don't think it was an English name. Put it that way. Oh dear, what a pity. And there was someone else too. I don't know if it matters, but the same name kept coming up over and over. Shin, it was. Don't suppose it means anything, but...
Did you say Shin?
What? It does mean something?
Well, Zix knew the name too. You mentioned her as well. The one who actually did the deeds. And now we find out her name appeared in Grex's secret notebook. We haven't seen you for a little while, have we, Gina?
Well, of course not. I've been busy, ain't I? Investigating that. The lads at the yard are trying to trace the boss's movements the day before it happened.
The day before, that would be the undercover investigation into the Red-Headed League. Then,
only the boss didn't go, did he? You found some cove what was pretending to be him, didn't you, Odo?
yes, it was Mr. Vigil who actually went to the park on Lime Street that day, posing as Gregson.
Well, anyway, you ain't the only one turning stuff up. I've got my own ways of getting results. When me and my partner here get together, there's nothing we can't track down. Oh, little Toby, he's such a faithful friend.
So, have you tracked anything down then?
What do you think, eh? Of course we have. Can't you tell, though? Can't tell you, though. Police business, isn't it? Anyway, the point is, if you don't ever need any help, you know who to turn to, right? Me and the Hellhound here.
Right. Because he looks oh so hellish almost. Gina, about your Hellhound there.
Chief Inspector Toby, you mean? He's the pride of the force, he is. In Japanese, police dog means something quite different, and not altogether nice to those involved in crime. But here in Britain, it's a wonderful compliment, it seems, for a canine at least.
Should be, after all, in the great exhibition case the other day. It was Toby here who managed to locate Drever's workshop.
Maybe it's time for another demonstration of what this super dog can do, eh?
Do you have something the Chief Inspector could catch the scent of, I wonder?
Take that!
Well, Chief Inspector Toby, if you wouldn't mind having a sniff of this. You might be a little too keen, don't you think? Chief Inspector made short work of Gina there. Look what he's gone to.
Oh my, that trunk clearly still has a very strong scent. Of Inspector Gregson.
In other words, it must have belonged to him.
Alright, it's a fair cop, I suppose.
You nearly got away with it too.
You always talk so proudly of Chief Inspector Toby's nose and what it can achieve. Did it not cross your mind that he might identify something that was right next to us? Yeah, that was a bit of a bloomer, wasn't it?
That's enough now then, Gina.
Huh?
I think it's time you told us the truth about that trunk.
It weren't like that. It just weren't.
What are you talking about?
I know what's got going through that head of yours, but that ain't what happened.
Right then, what did happen?
Well, like I said before, we were trying to trace the boss's movements. So I let Toby here have a whiff of the boss's overcoat. And as soon as I'd done that, he went off like a shot. Straight to that sandwich.
To a sandwich? Not to a bag of chips?
Mr. Naruto, I believe Gina means the witness.
Oh, I forgot about that sandwich.
Yeah, he had it in between them wooden boards of his, the boss's trunk.
You mean when they heard the sound like a gunshot and all piled in here?
Exactly. He nabbed it from the scene. Goodness. Me and the Chief Inspector gave that sandwich a good gridding, and you know what he said?
I thought it might fetch a good price, and the chap wouldn't be in it anymore, so... But that's all I did. Nothing more than nothing.
What you had me the cheek of it, eh? Stealing the dead boss's stuff to flog.
So Miss Venus wasn't the only one to meddle with the scene of the crime then.
How could they? So anyway, that's how it happened. And it's a pretty decent trunk, so I figured I might as well make use of it. Is there something wrong with that, eh? Well,
Maybe you and Mr. Sandwich are trying to figure out the answer to that question together.
I think perhaps that trunk should be turned over to the police, don't you? What are you on about? I am the police.
Gina, if you wouldn't mind. Could we maybe examine it?
Yeah, alright then. Do what you want with it. Thank you. We shall make a detailed record of our examination of the evidence.
See this huge gash across the side of the trunk here? It's gone right through the leather and into the metal behind.
Gosh, for a metal chest like this to have been so badly damaged. Whatever made the gash must have struck the side of the trunk with considerable force.
Wonder how it happened. Look at this dark stain here. Do you think?
Yes, I'm afraid so. I think it's blood.
I knew you were going to say that. So that presumably means...
That this was present at the scene when Inspector Gregson was killed. It's the most logical conclusion, yes.
I think Gina's been carrying this around with her. If you didn't know any better, I suppose it does look like a grease stain from all the fish and chips. Let's have a look inside. Look, there's something inside.
Oh, let's see. Appears to be a passport authorizing them to travel overseas.
Was Inspector Gregson about to go on a trip abroad then?
Perhaps the date of departure might tell us something. That was... Oh,
What is it?
it was for travel on the 31st of October. Just one day before the incident.
What? Really? Gregson went to France the day before his body was discovered. the matter with Toby? Why is he acting so aggressively towards me all of a sudden?
Mr. Naruto, be careful. It must be the trunk.
Ah!
Toby, hey, what are you doing? You're gonna lick his face off. Mr. Naruto, Mr. Naruto. Gina, quickly, hail a carriage. Mr. Naruto, are you alright?
Mrs. Addo? Ma, caught us again at last. A blessed relief, my dear fellow. After all, to drop dead after a moderate licking by a small terrier. Most unseemly.
What is or isn't seemly is irrelevant here, Mr. Sholmes. So glad there's no lasting damage. How are you feeling?
I'm fine, thank you. Did you bring me back here? What's this on my head? A bandage? Sadly, we have no ice, so that's a compress of sugar water. Sugar water?
Don't worry, Mr. Naruto. It's the first stage treatment that my father taught me.
Oh, thank you. So, let us take tea when you're feeling up to it. But of course, no sugar in the patient's cup. The bump on my head is throbbing sweetly enough. Don't worry.
Whenever you feel ready, then. Are you alright, Mr. Naruto? It's rather unusual to find ourselves here in the middle of our investigations.
It just occurred to me that I might have forgotten something when we left this morning.
Please don't worry. As long as you continue to investigate thoroughly, you won't go far wrong.
Oh, yes, of course. Let's get back to work as soon as possible. Thank you for your concern, Mr. Sholmes. My dear fellow, think nothing of it. I must say I was quite startled when I heard that you'd been attacked by a dog. For a moment I feared that infamous murderer of so many had come back from the dead. You mean the professor? Fortunately, I see your prize throat is unscathed. That stiff, turned-up collar of yours obviously afforded some welcome protection. Is that close to death? All I remember is the dog licking my face over and over and over again. Well, if you wish to avoid such troubles in future, a little mustard spread on the cheeks should do the trick. I should think that would balance the sweetness of your bandage rather splendidly.
Steam is rising gently from the kettle as always.
Yes, it does feel right somehow, unless it doesn't feel right somehow unless it is. The steam has an unusual scent today.
Perhaps the sweet potatoes that I brought back from Japan with me already. Oh, Mr. Naruto, I heard that, you know.
Tears of joy, Mr. Sato, on my mouth.
Schwarzbiergebot, brodend wie ein Feuerberg, den Schlund es mir verbrannt, ach Hopfen deine Wut. Her mit dem Knacker ich befahl, hat
What on
wie
earth is going on right here?
Diamant den Zahn in zwei es brach, o über
Am I having a bad
deine
dream?
Wut. Herr dem Scheit
Ah, no.
häufig genug
It's an old German folk song.
und
Rather a
auf
fine
den
rendition, I think.
ersten Streich
It's the least of my concerns.
alle Seiten es
Iris?
weh ohne an die Wut. Her mit dem
Iris,
Schwarzbiergebot,
what's the matter?
brodend wie ein Feuerberg, den Schlund
Who is that
es
sprawling, I mean,
verbrannt,
that relaxed gentleman over there?
Hopfen deine Wut. Her mit
Iris,
dem Knacker ich
she even listening?
befahl, hat wie
Excuse me, sir.
ein
I do apologize for troubling you whilst you're singing so merrily, but would you be kind enough to explain the situation? Well, that works. A crooning gentleman and a mute young girl, a rather tantalizing juxtaposition. And one that appears to have incited the gods of deduction within me to find their voices too.
Mr. Sholmes, do you mean...
The strains of reasoning within me are playing now as a delightful duet. One melody sings of a reunion full of nostalgia, whilst the other is a morose theme about the great secret you're trying so desperately to conceal, Iris. She's turned as white as a sheet.
So as usual, you've instantly seen to the very heart of the matter.
And by the time my own brief performance is over, I feel sure this gentleman's song will reach its finale. So then, to Musicland, where all is sweetness and delicacy and harmony. Pray do enjoy Herlock Sholmes' latest Logic and Reasoning Spectacular. Firstly, we consider the gentleman's nationality. Clearly, he's a German with no grasp of the English language, as evidenced by the Germanic song he sings and his apparent inability to understand when asked to desist. So, why is the man here at all, and in such apparently high spirits? The answer, of course, Iris is clearly known to you. Indeed, we need only follow the gaze of those bright young eyes to unravel that particular part of this mystery. The reason for this man's mildly irritating warbling is revealed by the herbal tea. You obviously offered our German guest a cup of your latest herbal blend. The tea's delectable flavour has made the man's spirits soar, and resulted in this joyful ditty tumbling incessantly from his lips. I eagerly await sampling the flavour myself, that I may join the fellow in his state of elation. Now to the next question. Who exactly is this gentleman availing himself so thoroughly on this settee? As it happens, a number of years ago now, a certain gentleman of German origin engaged my services in solving a particularly delicate case. He required the retrieval of letters once sent to an acquaintance that might have proved problematic. In order to conceal his noble identity, he also arrived at my office in a mask. The gentleman's name was Wilhelm Gottsreich Sigismund von Orestein, the King of Germany. If my memory serves, the mask worn by this gentleman is identical. Yes, there can be no question. That mask belongs to the King of Germany. It would appear that His Majesty remembers the fine service I afforded him, and has decided to show his face again, mask and all, in order to express his gratitude. A well-mannered monarch indeed. Wouldn't you agree, my dear fellow? So the identity of the masked visitor is in fact my former client, the King of Germany. Indeed, his son is currently in London as well, enjoying the wonders of the Great Exhibition. Which leaves us with one remaining imponderable. Yes, you, young Iris. But your apparent inexplicable silence is unable to hide the truth. Yes, the reason for your muteness is concealed inside that knapsack. A £5 note, I believe. I must say, as your compatriot, I'm deeply saddened. It would appear that you've allowed yourself to be bribed into silence by His Royal Highness, earning yourself some spending money in exchange for keeping quiet about the King's secret. And now the final piece of the puzzle. What is this secret you strive to hide with your silence, Iris? Ah yes, we need only follow that brief involuntary twitch of your eyes to find the answer. You were attempted to abscond with that coffee cup. My favourite coffee cup, in fact. Or should I say the handle of my favourite coffee cup? It appears that His High-Spirited Highness broke it in the midst of his hijinks. Which leads us to the sad truth. Favorite coffee cup has been broken by the King of Germany, and Iris, you tried to conceal it from me. I shall have a bill sent via governmental channels to the German royal family for its replacement. Thus concludes Sherlock Holmes' great deduction of this painful puzzle.
Mit dem Schwarzbiergebot, Boden, Wien, Feuerberg,
With your silence as well, the follow's jubilant warbling rather rings in the ears, does it not?
Mr. Sholmes, I must say something does rather trouble me.
Pray, Mr. Sado, do tell.
His Royal Highness doesn't appear to have moved a muscle since we arrived.
Huh? And you haven't said a word either, Iris. Mr. Sholmes has it all right, you might as well own up to it now. Your reasoning isn't entirely without substance, I must admit. And one other thing, Mr. Sholmes. Yet another grievance, Mr. Naruhodo? Surely not. Actually, I read the story of that case recently, the one you were just describing. And according to that, at least, it wasn't the King of Germany. It was the King of Bohemia. Goodness, was it?
Yes, that's quite true. Master Gots, the prince, testified to that in court. In his words, I have come to see the great exhibition all the way from my home in Bohemia.
I would ask you to keep that minor error to yourselves. It could easily become quite a scandal.
I believe, Mr. Naruto. Then it's our turn now to make some corrections to a number of minor errors that may have slipped in.
Yes, even Mr. Sholmes is willing to admit he might be slightly wide of the mark this time. Although it's clear that Iris is definitely hiding something. I need to find out the truth behind this mysterious scene. But one truth is incontrovertible. My favourite coffee cup is no more. So, shall we embark again on a joint presentation of Sherlock Holmes' logic and reasoning spectacular? Oi. So what? It's some mix of herbs that gives you the urge to sing?
Goodness, I should like to try some.
I like to hear you singing, but this man? Just how long does he intend to keep up with that tune, do you suppose?
As I said, he's been stock still the entire time. And if you look closely, his lips aren't moving either. So I'm not sure what's actually responsible for that spirited singing. But I suspect the answer lies at the end of Iris's gaze.
Wait.
This is a gramophone, still rarely seen in our own country. The sound certainly appears to be coming from the horn.
Machines singing? That can't be right.
Science and technology are changing the world rapidly, Mr. Naruto. What's right is changing too.
It's too much for my brain.
Well, at least we found our answer.
Take that!
The reason for the man's mildly irritating warbling is revealed by the gramophone. Indeed, for no well-bred gentleman would break into an obscure folk song when making a social call. In other words, this gentleman isn't singing at all. In fact, it would appear that the fellow is unconscious. The music seems to have stopped now. May I ask you, Mr. Naruto?
Yes?
Why would I have purchased a recording of that gibberish? How should I know? Well, never mind. On with the deduction. Who exactly is this gentleman availing himself so thoroughly of our city? Yeah. The Union King has masked bloody bad. Well, you already established that it was actually the King of Bohemia.
Seems Mr. Shame intends to persist with his Germany theory for some reason.
Come to think of it, the young prince was wearing a mask as well, wasn't he?
Master Gotts, the boy whom you had in tears.
Don't remind me, or anyone else.
Do you suppose all members of the aristocracy of mainland Europe wear masks?
Sure they do. Well, probably. Anyway, the point is that mask doesn't belong to any king.
No, that's right. As we well know. Because we can identify the true owner of the mask.
Take that! Yes, there can be no question. That mask belongs to Cousin Arasogi. In other words, my memory is sublimely unreliable. Maybe you could try to make that sound positive. Kazuma's mask has been languishing on this metal chest for several days. Now that doesn't explain why the gentleman is wearing it now. But it is now a simple matter to determine our guest's true identity. After all, the gentleman is unconscious. We need only excuse ourselves in advance, and gently lift the mask and peer beneath it. I don't believe it.
Father? Father?
I'm afraid, Mr. Sato, you must be mistaken.
No, I think not, Mr. Jones.
And it would appear our logic and reasoning has once again revealed the truth. This mysterious visitor
It's my unconscious father, Eugen Mikitoba.
logic and reasoning are just looking and saying. So that's a £5 banknote poking out from Iris' knapsack, is it?
Oh dear, I can't be sure. Most money that we encounter is in coin form.
I know, not even sure if we've seen any banknotes here in Britain at all, have we?
But anyway, Father would never have paid money for Iris' silence.
Certainly seems like the silent type himself, though, judging by his present state. Must be some other reason for Iris' silence, I suppose.
That's what Iris is trying so hard to not to give away with her eyes. Something entirely different. This metal chest, it contains important documents, doesn't it?
Yes, details of all the cases Mr. Sholmes has worked on over the years. Written up by Iris' father, if I'm remembering correctly. Iris insists that the chest is kept locked at all times. She's never once shown me inside.
Well, its contents are invaluable to her, I suppose, and entirely irreplaceable. Look at it now. The catch is unlocked for once.
Ah, so it is. That's hard to ignore.
Very. I've never seen that chest unlocked before in all the time we've been staying here at Baker Street.
Take that! Yes, the reason for your muteness is concealed inside that metal chest. An excellent observation. For upon closer inspection, there is something different about the chest's appearance. It's kept locked at all times, yet now the catch is open. Evidently, this has something to do with your refusal to speak, Iris. But it's a simple enough matter to incite you to speak, I'm sure. I merely need to open this chest. Here we go.
No! Hurley, don't!
Mr. Sholmes!
Mr. Sholmes! Hurley!
He's dead.
Never. Oh, Hurley, I told you not to open it.
Ah, so you found your voice now, Iris. In other words, what just happened clearly reveals the truth here. Yes, the real reason for your silence until now is...
This is somewhat different to the usual dancer deduction you perform with Mr. Sholmes, isn't it?
Well, he's left me alone on the ballroom floor, so I'm going to have to dance this next part my solo. But anyway, I need to get to the bottom of this, for my own peace of mind. Now then, Iris isn't usually the silent type, so...
You mean you don't actually know the answer yet, despite that knowing point of finger? Despite that knowing point of the finger before.
Mrs. Otto, sometimes a man needs to point his finger first and think later.
Oh well, if you say so. I think we'd better examine Iris more closely and try to rescue this situation then.
It's the key she's holding, look. Sure that wasn't in her hands before, was it?
No, you're quite right. It appeared as if by magic.
That's strange. Big old iron key. Where did it materialize from?
Take that!
Yes, the real reason for your silence until now is that key behind your back. When Mr. Sholmes was thrown into the air before, just before you called out to try to stop him, you slipped something out of your mouth. That something is the key now in your hands. No doubt the key to the chest.
You're so clever, Bruno.
So now it becomes clear. Thanks to Mr. Sholmes' graphic demonstration, we can well imagine what happened here.
But
Professor Mikotoba also opened this metal chest, only to be punched into the air. And lands sprawled on the settee.
But wait, that doesn't explain all the facts. What about the stylish scarf and the cup of tea above all? Why would he be wearing Cosima Summer's mask?
Well, for those curious details, I can think of only one explanation. Clearly, an unbelievable miracle took place in this room. Isn't that right, Iris? Consider how the room was arranged before the whole painful experience took place. When Professor Mikotoba opened the chest, completely unaware of what awaited him inside, the mask was flung into the air just as he was, only to land neatly on his face when it fell back down. The teacup's journey through the air ended with it caught in the unconscious professor's finger.
You mean to say that the stylish scarf
Is actually just a tablecloth. This is the Great Detective's office after all, A place of miraculous deductions. Oh, would you expect anything less?
Yes, you're right. It happened exactly as you said. Brilliant, Runo.
Thus concludes Ryunosuke Naruto's great deduction of this punchy puzzle.
So then, why don't I make a fresh pot of tea for us all?
Objection!
An admirable performance, Mr. Naruto. But in the final act of the show there, you rather missed everything of importance. Mr. Sholmes? If you would cast your mind back to my earlier deduction. Iris, clearly you're hiding a great secret. She is? From the look on her face. Mr. Sholmes must be right. Whatever that great secret is, that cat isn't out of the bag yet. So I put it to you again. You were attempting to abscond with that coffee cup.
It really is a shame about Mr. Sholmes' cup.
Must have been smashed when Professor Mikotoba opened the chest.
Oh dear, so many things seem to have been broken here.
But now that the deduction has taken a different direction, Iris doesn't seem to be trying to hide the broken cup anymore.
In other words, her great secret is something else.
Let's put our observation skills to work here one final time then. Oh, look there. There seems to be some more papers there. Is Iris trying to hide them underneath the tray?
The insignia, Mr. Naruto. It's an official Scotland Yard document.
What? But why would Iris have
We must ask her.
an official Scotland Yard document?
Take that!
You were attempting to abscond with that case file. Virus, as you know very well, nothing escapes the attention of a great detective.
Oh no.
He visited Scotland Yard's autopsy laboratory earlier today. Dr. Gorey informed us that the autopsy report of Clint Van Zeeks had gone missing. Clint Van Zeeks? Yes, I do seem to recall that some years ago I asked to see the report in question. You were with me, weren't you, Iris?
I...
You mean it was you, Iris? So those papers you have there are...
I'm sorry. Forgive me.
In truth, I would like to have thought I could have predicted the booby-trapped chest. But it caught me completely off guard. I was very nearly the late consulting detective Herlock Sholmes.
I'm sorry, Hurley.
So you mean this autopsy report really is...
Yes, I took it from the lab, even though I knew it was very important. Was there something in it that troubled you, Iris? Not exactly something that troubled me. Something I'd been looking for. When I saw this report, when I saw the writing in it, I knew it was Daddy's.
The writing?
Your father's writing. What do you really mean?
Iris. It must be something that's hard for her to talk about. Forgive me for interrupting, my dear fellows. Mr. Sholmes, what is it? I feel as though the poor unconscious gentleman on the settee has been somewhat forgotten.
Father!
Perhaps we should find our guest somewhere more peaceful to rest. Mr. Naruhodo?
Yes?
Would you be so kind as to lend him your bed? We must do our very best to make him feel comfortable. Make him comfortable, I feel. Bleh. Oh, yes, of course. I'll help you carry him up.
So will I.
No, I can manage alone, thank you. You have tea to enjoy. You wouldn't want Iris's brew to stew. There's no better way to make the professor comfortable than dragging him upstairs like a trunk. I wonder, perhaps that was deliberate. Maybe Mr. Sholmes is making himself scarce to give Iris the chance to talk more freely.
We must use this opportunity to talk with Iris. Find out what's going on.
Would you like to tell us about it, Iris? About your father?
I'm sure I told you before, didn't I? That Daddy used to be Hurley's partner. Yes, and the notes about all the cases they solved together are kept inside that metal chest. That's right. Hurley told me, you see. He said that Daddy's somewhere far away now, so we can't meet.
That's one way of describing it.
Then, when I secretly unlocked the chest and read through the papers inside, I started to build up a picture in my head of what Daddy must be like.
And that's only natural.
You were just like any other girl of your age. I read that Daddy was a professor of medical science, so I studied and took my degree too.
Well, that's only natural, I suppose.
In that respect, you're not quite like any other girl of your age, though. But there was one thing that I could never find out. Daddy's name.
Ah,
His name wasn't on any of the notes that he'd made about his work with Hurley. But then one day...
that's what happened, is it? When you saw this autopsy report, you finally managed to work it out. Is that right?
Yes.
So it was the handwriting in the report that caught her eye.
When I saw the writing on that report, I could hardly believe it. I knew that handwriting. I thought to myself,
Because it was the same as the writing you'd seen on your father's case notes.
exactly. I was desperate to compare the two properly. I needed to see them side by side. I asked the doctor in the laboratory, but I was told I couldn't take the report away. And even worse, I was told that was the first and last time we'd be allowed to even to look at it there.
So you decided to steal it.
When I compared the autopsy report with the case notes I had here, there was no doubt. The handwriting was exactly the same. It was Daddy's.
And the signature of the coroner at the bottom of the autopsy report. Read Dr. John H. Wilson.
So that's how I finally found out. I learned Daddy's name at last.
I see.
Ever since then, I've called myself Iris Wilson. And that's also when I had the brilliant idea of writing stories all about Daddy's exciting times with Hurley. I decided there and then that I'd write the adventures of Herlock Sholmes. Oh, Iris, I had no idea the stories had quite such a deep personal significance for you.
I can see why the autopsy report was so important to her now. Why she was prepared to break the law to get her hands on it. I must apologize, Iris. I must apologize, Iris. This is really all my fault.
Hurley.
I made a promise, you see, that until the time was right, I'd keep the details about your father a secret.
I know, I've been very naughty. I'll take the autopsy report back to Dr. Gorey and apologize. I promise.
Yes, we'll go together, I think.
Then, let me look after it for you until we get there. I must go and water my herbs, I think. I'll see you all later.
Oh, Iris. She must be feeling awful. No, Mr. Sholmes is here for her, but still.
Ah,
What? How?
what? How? What's the meaning of this, Mr. Sholmes?
Mr. Sholmes? Oh, dear me. So, you've noticed, I see.
That would mean...
What's the matter, Mrs. Sato? You turned as white as a sheet.
It's this autopsy report, Mr. Naruto. The one from 10 years ago.
Okay, what did I miss?
The writing isn't Dr. Wilson's at all.
What do you mean? How could you possibly know that?
Because I know this writing very well. This writing it's my father's.
What? Professor Mikatoba's? Indeed, it's true. And now you know, my dear fellows. No, I don't know anything. What on earth does all this mean, Mr. Sholmes? It's the idea that's slowly forming in my mind. It's just too extraordinary to believe. Please, you have to explain. So, this autopsy report was actually penned by Professor Mikatoba then? But that makes no sense. It's not possible, surely. Not possible, my dear fellow. Pray, take a deep breath and think again.
Yes, you're right. In some ways. It actually makes a great deal of sense.
It does?
10 years ago is when Father returned to Japan after his extended study tour in Britain.
And prior to his return, where was Dr. Mikotoba engaged? Of course. He was an assistant in Dr. Wilson's laboratory, learning about forensic science. And as an assistant, he would have aided with the dissection work, making detailed notes, which would be assembled into a full autopsy report. Once the work was complete, the head coroner would check the contents and put his signature on the document.
In other words, the only writing of Dr. Wilson's in the report would be a signature at the end.
I see. So Iris got the wrong end of the stick, you mean? She saw that and assumed the whole report had been written by John H. Wilson.
Which is very understandable, of course.
A complicated situation. Thinking about it, most of what we know about you, Mr. Sholmes, comes from the published stories of your exploits.
Yes, The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, written by Iris.
And we really have no way of knowing what's fact and what's fiction. Most troubling for you, my dear fellow, I'm sure. So, what about this supposed partner of yours? Did he really exist or not? Ah, you've come straight to the point. I see.
And please come straight to the answer.
I believe Iris explained it in one of her installments. He was a trusted comrade, and the only person I could truly have called a friend.
And did these partners of yours truly make a record of all your cases? Are his notes really stored inside that metal chest?
Absolutely, my dear madam. Absolutely. So, where's your partner now? We rarely met. You see, he lives on the other side of the world. If this autopsy report and the records of all of your cases were penned by the same hand, and if the autopsy report was written, though not signed, by your famous partner, there would be only one logical conclusion. Pray, impress me. Your partner would have to be Eugene Mikotoba. In other words, Mr. Zato's father. Upon my word, Mr. Naruhodo. Yes? You are coming along wonderfully. You've hit upon the method at last. You've finally grasped the art of deduction. You mean to say... Allow me to introduce you to my great friend and partner, Mikotoba. Professor Mikotoba?
Does this mean that you're the real Dr. Wilson?
No, my dear. I'm still my old self. Eugene Mikotoba, your father.
Oh, of course.
This is obviously too much for Sasato's hand to take in. I must say, though, my old friend has attained worldwide celebrity as a great mystery solver as the greatest mystery of all. I still remember the first time we met. Oh, pray remind me, when was it again, Mikatoba? 16 years ago, Sholmes. Ah yes, quite. 16 years ago. I just arrived from Japan with Seishiro and Genshin. I was in search of lodgings close to the hospital, some comfortable rooms at a reasonable price. But rents are devilishly high in that particular area. And that's right, so I decided I needed someone to share lodgings and the expense. I was fortunate enough to be introduced to Sholmes, who found himself in a similar situation. I was a callow fellow back then, a mere shadow of the great detective you see before you now. I was working at the hospital's chemical laboratory at the time, indulging my curiosities for little gain. And the situation of our cohabitation led to us pursuing cases together, you see. Hard to believe, it was a mere 6 years, and a great many adventures. But in the last year of Mikatoba's stay in Britain, that most infamous case presented itself. The case with which you've become rather familiar yourselves, the Professor killings. After the trial, Seishiro and I were summoned back home. Hardly surprising given the circumstances. So there you have it. And as you know, all the details recorded by my trusty chronicler remain in that metal chest. This is just amazing. Professor Mikatoba really is Mr. Sholmes' famous partner.
Father?
Goodness, my dear. What a cunning look.
As your daughter, I'm very proud to learn that you were the great detective's right partner. But nevertheless, there's another mystery that I really must ask you to explain now.
And that is...
You know very well what it is. The unresolved matter of Iris's father.
Of course, I'd almost forgotten about that one. I should have seen this coming, I suppose.
Iris told us that all the notes about the great detective's adventures that are in that metal chest are written by our father. Isn't that correct, Mr. Sholmes?
That is indeed what I told young Iris.
But if you're Mr. Sholmes' partner, father, and you read all those case notes, then Iris's father must be you.
Upon my word, Mr. Sado. You are coming along wonderfully as well. You too have hit upon the method at last. You finally grasp the art of deduction.
What you've always told me, father, is that my mother died when I was born 16 years ago. And you left me in grandmother's care whilst you embarked on your study tour of Britain. And I've always accepted that. But all this about Iris.
There it is, set under his hands ice cold stare. No, now hold on a minute. It was very complicated. I mean, it's really not what you think.
Well, perhaps you'd like to explain exactly what it is.
There it is. Now the ice go from ice cold to red hot just before she... No, really. You've got the wrong end of the stick. Sholmes, say something, man. That's quite enough, my fiery fellows. Mr. Sholmes, when did he get all dressed up? Whilst I don't like to interrupt this exciting exploration of the past, Mikatoba and I have urgent matter that requires a short excursion.
But it's very late, Mr. Sholmes. Where must you go?
Why, my dear madam, is that not obvious? My partner and I must pursue our natural enemies. So get your coat, Mekatoba. The game is afoot. But Sholmes, I really must give Cesaro a full explanation, I think. Later, my dear fellow, later. Our carriage awaits downstairs already. You haven't changed one iota, have you? I mean, really, I visit our home after 10 long years. And when I open that chest of fit of nostalgia, I quite inexplicably pass out. And as if it wasn't enough, when I eventually regain consciousness, I run straight into all this.
Father, please, go with Mr. Sholmes now.
What?
I've no doubt that whatever happens, you are acting in everyone's best interests. I trust you, completely.
Cesaro.
And sending the great detective and his great partner off on a renewed adventure together is more than I could have hoped for in my wildest dreams.
Very well then, we'll speak again later. So, I believe your own work is done for the day. I wish you the best of luck for tomorrow. Yes, Neruda. Good luck in reaching a decision.
A decision? Whether to go back to Japan, I suppose.
So much happened that day that I barely knew what to do with myself. It would only be later that I'd come to realize how amidst the chaos I'd unleashed were all the clues I needed to finally unearth the truth. And that all the turmoil was necessary to give me the resolve to see everything through.
Oh. Okay.
So I guess it goes into the next goddamn...
Whatever. That's apparently episode 4 done. It continues in episode 5. I am surprised by that. Oh well. That then will be all for now, and I'll be back in an hour-ish, maybe more, dunno, with Xenoblade. For now though, bye!